Hello, and welcome to Grey.com Talks. Today, we're talking with Tara Stainski, President and CEO, Chief Scientific Officer at the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund International, an organization that is protecting and studying the endangered mountain gorillas. And if you're new to our podcast, please press subscribe button either on YouTube or your podcast app, because today we're going to learn about an organization that is helping people and saving gorillas. Hello, Tara. Welcome to Great.com Talks. We're excited to have you here.
Hi, Kareem. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Wonderful. How would you describe the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund International for someone who is not familiar with your work?
Well, we are the world's longest running and largest organization that is dedicated fully to gorilla conservation. So basically, we are out in the field every single day protecting individual gorillas and their families. And then, as you mentioned, we also do a lot of work on the human side of conservation. So helping communities that live near the gorillas with some of their basic needs as relates to livelihood, education, food security, so that they put less pressure on the gorillas' forest homes.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's beautiful. The fact that you have been the longest lasting organization that is dedicated to gorilla conservation, and you are also not only focusing on gorillas, but also around the communities, around the people who live next to the gorillas and who are supporting the livelihood of gorillas. That's very beautiful work. Could you please tell us more about gorillas as endangered species, how long they have been endangered species, what's the current population, where do they live, just some background information on gorillas?
Definitely, I'd love to. I started my career as a scientist studying gorillas. So one of my favorite things is always to talk about them. So a little gorilla one-on-one. 101, there are 4 types of gorillas. There are 2 found in Western Africa, and then there are 2 types that are found in Eastern Africa, and those are the ones the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund works with. Sadly, all types of gorillas are considered endangered, and actually 3 of the 4 are considered critically endangered. And so that is the last step before extinction in the wild. And the reasons for this vary depending on where you are in Africa, but a lot of it relates to either habitat destruction or just having a small amount of habitat left, disease, poaching, and just also, again, local communities that rely on these forests as well for their livelihoods. And so, put additional pressure on the forest home of the gorillas. So their numbers vary. For mountain gorillas that we work with, they're only found in 3 countries: Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Uganda. And there are just over 1,000 of them left. The good news, though, Kareem, is that their numbers are gradually increasing. So Dian Fossey started working with them in 1967, and at the time, she thought they would go extinct before the year 2000. Instead, they're actually not only the only type of gorilla increasing in the wild, but they are the only great ape increasing in the wild. So the population where we work was down to 250 individuals when Dian was there, and it now numbers over 600. And then there's another small population that has another 400, bringing them to just over 1,000. So great news that their numbers are increasing, but obviously still very, very small number of individuals left. And so they're a highly conservation dependent species. The news for the other types of gorillas is not as good. So we also work with a subspecies called Growers gorillas. They are found just over the border from Rwanda. They live only in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We estimate that there's about 3,500 of them left. But what's very disturbing is that we've lost over 80% of them in the last 25 years. So their numbers are crashing, which is why we expanded our work from working with just mountain gorillas to the Growers gorillas to hopefully help reverse the tide for them the way that we've been able to help do with mountain gorillas.
Mm-hmm. It's very sad that all species of gorillas are endangered, but the fact that there's also good news. The fact that when Dian Fossey started her work, there were only 250 mountain gorillas, and now with the work that you and your organization do on conservations, the number of them have grown to 600, and now you are able to take that best practice that you reached while protecting mountain gorillas, and now you are implementing it into protecting different gorillas and sharing the knowledge and building better conditions for them. We talked. You mentioned several reasons why gorillas have become extinct, and dependency of the people that live in those forests. But what are some changes that have been made in the areas that you and your organizations are working, where mountain gorillas are, that enable them to increase the population?
That's a great question. And again, our model of conservation is really what we call a people-centered model. So we really feel that for gorillas and wildlife to thrive, the people have to benefit as well. And so in Rwanda, all of the gorillas there live in a national park. So they all have some level of protection. And the communities around the park are very engaged in their conservation. There's actually a revenue sharing scheme that has been set up by the government of Rwanda. So tourists can come and see the gorillas, and 10% of what they pay to see the gorillas then gets shared with the local communities for them to work on, building infrastructure or other things that they need. So there's a real direct benefit of the gorillas themselves to local communities, and they've really become active partners in their conservation. Where we work in Congo, it's a very different story, where most of the gorillas do not live in national parks. Most of them do not have any formal protection. And so there, our work with local communities really is helping them to set up community-based reserves. And just about a week ago on Earth Day, we announced that a 1,300 square kilometer area in Congo that we've been working with local communities to protect is now officially recognized by the Congolese government. So what before an area that had no formal protection now is protected, not just for Grauer's gorillas, but all of the incredible biodiversity that lives there. And then for the human communities that depend on this forest for their food and their livelihoods. So communities are definitely an active part of conservation, and we're very excited to work alongside them to conserve their natural biodiversity.
Mm-hmm. I really like your approach that is people-based, around people-based. You mentioned the example that when gorillas live in a national parks, the revenue sharing scheme was able to fund infrastructures for the communities that live next to the national parks, and as well, and the fact that in Congo, you mentioned there are small communities themselves. The people are taking actions, not waiting for the government protection, but they have built the sites themselves. So it shows that people do really care about gorillas and are taking care of the future and the environment that gorillas live in. So that's the great transformation, and the fact that seeing that people actually care, that's very beautiful, because we are responsible as human beings for the extinction of the gorillas, and now we're responsible for saving and conserving them. So that's really, really important. You have research sites based in different locations. Can you please tell us about those research sites and what actions do they perform? What are their responsibilities?
Yeah, so we operate under what we say we have 4 strategic pillars. And so we've kind of touched on 2 of them, Kareem. The first one being this direct protection, having trackers in the field every day, protecting individual gorillas and their families. And that's something that we've been doing since the time of Dian Fossey. So more than 53 years in Rwanda, and we've been in Congo now for 20 years. So that's one of our pillars. Another one is this engaging and helping local communities. So we talked about some of the work that we've been doing to support local communities and help meet some of their basic needs. But our third pillar is around scientific research. And again, Dian Fossey, when she originally went to Rwanda, the goal was to study gorillas. As one of our closest living relatives, they share over 98% of our DNA. They're a great window into our evolution. And so she went there to study the gorillas. And then when she saw the threats to them, that's when she also started doing conservation work. But we've been studying them ever since. So we now in Rwanda have studied more than 6 generations of gorillas. And a lot of what is known about gorillas has come from the research that has been done and was started by Dian Fossey. And I always think one of her biggest legacies is that when she went there, the image of the gorilla was King Kong, ferocious beast, like, this guy behind me that you see here, that's a silverback beating his chest, which is one of the iconic gorilla displays, male gorilla displays. But what she really was able to show through getting to know them as individuals, from studying their family structure, is that they're incredibly gentle by nature. Sure, they can be aggressive when they need to defend themselves, but overall they're very gentle. And that, she changed their nickname to Gentle Giant and really changed our perception, the world's perception of these individuals. And I think that's part of what has made people really interested in learning more about gorillas and conserving gorillas. But one of our most, I think, fun findings that we just, we're still learning things pretty much every day about them. They're incredibly smart animals. They've got very complex social groups that they live in, and they're constantly teaching us new things. And a paper that we just published maybe a week or two ago has to go with this iconic chest beating display that you see. We were able to show by doing two different types of science. So, when Diane went there, she just had a notebook and would write things down. And she also had an audio recorder, so she would record their vocalizations. But, now technology helps us study even more elements of gorillas. So a study we recently published, we recorded these chest beats so we could look at how, what the frequency of them was. And at the same time, we use a special camera to take pictures of the gorillas that enable us to measure how big they are. You think about it, if you want to know how big a gorilla is, it's really difficult. They're not going to come and stand against the wall against a height chart and let you see. So we have a specialized camera that we can take photos, and then back in the lab on a computer, we can actually measure how big gorillas are. And what we found is that larger gorillas who are more successful in general. They generally are more successful at attracting females. They have more babies. They also have lower chest beats. So the idea is that this chest beat is actually an honest signal of male quality. So females can learn from a male's chest beat. If she's evaluating a male, she can learn from his chest beat something about his size. The same way rival males can also learn about a male's size from his chest beat. So that was a really exciting finding, that after 50 years of watching chest beats, we're finally starting to understand the kind of information that's communicated when males chest beat with each other.
Mm-hmm. The fact that Dian Fossey was able to achieve such a progress in studying gorillas is wonderful, and you guys have dedicated over 50 years to scientific research of the gorillas, and the image of the gorillas that you mentioned from being aggressive now is changed due to the scientific research that you were able to do to the gentle gorillas, and the fun research, the fun facts that you mentioned about having doing the less chest bumps, it indicates that they are more attractive and they can have more babies. So you mentioned, we share the DNA. It's very 98% similarity, and they're very important to study evolution. And the fact that you were able to study 6 generations of gorillas, it's beautiful, because as our people like, we know 2 to 3 generations mostly of our grandparents, but these gorillas, they due to the research, you were able to observe the behavior, observe the culture, observe the livelihood of them for 6 generations, and see how they are evolving and how they're changing. So that's very, very beautiful. For someone,
yeah, and each of them is individually known. We know them all. They all have a nose print, which is unique. So kind of like we have a unique fingerprint, they have a unique nose print. So they all have names. We know them all. And it is really interesting when you have 6 generations of data, you can start to look at, what does make certain males successful or certain females successful. We can see similarities in personality. They all have individual personalities, but Titus was one of our most gentle gorillas. He was a dominant silverback, and his sons have, a similar personality type. So it is fascinating when you know multiple generations, just as in people. We can see how family members will share characteristics. It's the same thing in gorillas.
Wow, that's quite very interesting. The fact that the son inherited the qualities of the father of the gorilla, and you can see the similarities. That's very, very interesting. And as a person who is not very familiar with the wildlife, now hearing your stories, hearing how gorillas live, I personally have become more engaged, and I feel, although just by not doing research, but listening to the expert. Such a, although might be instant, but very deep connection. So that's very beautiful that we can, through listening to the experts, through listening to the stories of gorillas, we can build such a bond. But for someone who is not familiar with gorillas in general and doesn't know why they're endangered and doesn't really understand why they need to be protected, can you please explain to us why gorillas are important and why do we need to protect them?
It's a great question that I get asked a lot, Kareem. And I think it's really important for people to understand this because, obviously I love gorillas. I've dedicated my entire career to them, and I think they deserve a place on this planet. But they are really, if we look at the bigger picture, they really are critical to not just, not just to have gorillas, but they're critical to our survival. So gorillas live in the Congo Basin, which is the second largest standing tropical rainforest left on our planet. And it's probably the most intact rainforest because rainforest in Indonesia and rainforest in Brazil have very much been destroyed by humans. But the Congo Basin is this beautiful forest. And as a tropical rainforest, it acts as one of our best defenses against climate change. Because what do trees do? They take in carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas, and they let out oxygen. So these forests are literally the lungs of our planet and one of our solutions for our own survival when it comes to climate change. And gorillas and the other wildlife that live there, basically you can think of them as the gardeners of these forests. They're like ecosystem engineers. So as they move through the forest, they disturb plant communities, which allows the plant communities to stay healthy. They disperse seeds, they eat fruit, and then they'll go and they'll defecate and they'll disperse seeds around so that trees can continue to grow and germinate. So when you remove animals like this from the ecosystem, the ecosystem is not as healthy. And we need these ecosystems for our own survival. It's not just for the survival of the gorillas, but for our survival as well.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's greatly explained. That gorillas and other wildlife that are living in the rainforest, they are important because they are, you mentioned, they are gardeners as well as the guardians of those places because although they are guardians of those places, but they are guardians of us as our people, because due to the fact that they exist, due to the fact they are able to travel within the rainforest, we can protect our environment, and the effect of carbon dioxide and the effect of the pollution can be reduced, and they are actually our savers. So we need to be, to an extent, we need to be thankful for them, and we need to help them to populate more so they can also take into different forests, so they can garden and guard bigger locations for us. So that's very, very beautiful connection, and there is a connection that can be created based on that. How do you
Right. We always say that saving gorillas, it's bigger than saving gorillas. When we save gorillas, we actually save ourselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The motto of your organization, Saving Gorillas and Helping People. Yes, you are helping individuals like me that are based from all over the world to have a better tomorrow, sustainable tomorrow. So that's very important to understand. What do you see the future of the gorillas being in the next 10 to 15 years? Do you see more conservation work being done? Do you see their population expanding?
Definitely. I mean, I think we are at a critical crossroads, not just for gorillas, but for wildlife in general. The estimates are that over 1 million species are at risk of extinction, and gorillas are certainly one of them. I am very confident in the future for gorillas. I think, as you mentioned earlier, the mountain gorillas really give us inspiration. This was a subspecies that most people thought would be gone. But because of the vision of the governments where they live and the work of conservation organizations like ours, they are increasing in number. So I think it really shows us that we can make a difference. the biggest things we need are more resources. Conservation is woefully underfunded. In the United States, it's estimated that maybe less than 5% of all charitable giving goes to the environment. So we're just working with so little funding for the scale of work that we're trying to do. So really getting governments on board, philanthropists on board to prioritize conservation, because we've already talked about by conserving these places, we're actually protecting ourselves as well. And then I think the other thing that is really important is that we're training the next generation of conservationists in Africa and beyond. And I mentioned our 4 pillars earlier. We've talked about 3 of them: protection, science, and helping communities. Our 4th pillar is around doing exactly that. So working with institutions in Congo and Rwanda, where we're based, to really provide the next generation of African conservationists the skills and that they need to face the conservation challenges of the future. So that's a significant part of our work now. And we're building a new home in Rwanda where we're excited to really be able to scale that up, this training work, in the region where we work and even on the continent of Africa as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. More funding, more support needs to go to environment, especially into conservation, because it's an urgent issue. It's something that requires action, and the work that organizations such as yours are doing demonstrates that when action put in place, when there are people dedicated, and when there is funding available, we can achieve progress. For someone who would like to support the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund International, how can they do that?
It's super easy. You can go to our website, gorillafund.org, and people can donate. We love monthly donors. That sort of sustainable funding lets us know that we have, money to continue our programs and to expand them. You can actually adopt a gorilla. So these are gorillas that we are out in the forest protecting every day. And so we give you updates on what your little adoptee is doing. So there's lots of ways, to do that, kind of engage with the organization. We would love for people to follow us on social media. We're constantly posting information about the gorillas and our programs. But even people that may not have the ability to give financially, I think just educating yourself, listening to podcasts like this, and knowing, it always amazes me that a lot of people don't realize that gorillas are endangered and we're at risk of losing them. So having this knowledge, spreading awareness, the more people that know, hopefully the more people that want to help. And then also using your voice. We need politicians that are going to help and support conservation, are going to support climate change initiatives. So we can always use our voice by voting and other ways to make sure that we have leaders that are going to help prioritize the conservation of gorillas and all these other amazing wildlife and wild places on the planet.
Absolutely. For you listening and viewing, the link to the gorillafund.org will be provided in the description. So you can go to the website and familiarize yourself with the great work Tara and her team are doing. And also, if you'd like to adopt a gorilla and understand how gorillas live and engage into their livelihood, you can do that. And you also can make a financial contribution to support and help to save gorillas. Thank you so much, Tara. It was wonderful to get to know you and the great work you and your organization are doing in saving gorillas.
Thank you so much again, Kareem, for having me.
For you listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, please press like and share button, because this will show the YouTube algorithms and podcast algorithms that this conversation is important, that we need to support organizations like Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund, who are saving gorillas and helping to save our environment. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.